Hey there everyone, Diamond Miner Studios here, and it's time for another installment in the Mario Marathon. Last time I covered what made Super Mario All-Stars an incredible deal that was well worth the price of admission. It included remastered versions of the NES Mario games, and there was even a re-release that added Super Mario World. Now that I've covered all the home console Mario platformers from this era, there's still a few more left to talk about in the realm of handhelds. Nintendo has always been the most dominant player in the handheld console market. Even during the times when their home consoles struggled to ship many units, they could pretty much bank on their handheld consoles making up for the lost sales. They've always essentially held a monopoly on this market, and that was even the case from the very beginning when they released the Game Boy, their first handheld to have interchangeable games. Of course, the company wanted to give their famed portly Italian plumber some representation on the handheld, and thus developed several Mario games for the system. These games took the form of the Super Mario Land sub-series, which were essentially scaled-back versions of the gameplay the console games had. Nintendo ended up making two Super Mario Land games. Yes, I know Wario Land 1 has the title Super Mario Land 3, but it's just a marketing ploy, kinda like Yoshi's Island receiving the title Super Mario World 2. These games were fairly successful in terms of sales, but in spite of that, not as many people seem to remember them as much as the console games. Let me tell you, that is a damn shame, because these two unassuming Game Boy games are pretty great in their own right. They are, as the title of this video says, the definition of underrated gems. So let's dive right in and explain why that's the case. By the way, I'll be playing these games through the SNES Super Game Boy because it's the only decent method I have of recording them. Anyway, let's get started with, of course, Super Mario Land. As usual, I want to start with a bit of development history. This game was developed by Nintendo R&D 1, the same team that made the Game Boy hardware. The company wanted a new Mario game for the Game Boy's launch, alongside the killer app Tetris. However, since Shigeru Miyamoto and the rest of Nintendo EAD were busy with the development of Super Mario World and Link to the Past, development was handed to R&D 1, with the role of producer going to the Game Boy creator Gunpei Yokoi. Since the game was not directed or produced by Miyamoto or any of the members of EAD, it felt very different from the other Mario games at the time. It was soon released in 1989 to massive success. In fact, it actually sold more copies than Super Mario Bros. 3. That's hard to believe, I know, but it's true. Anyways, while it was praised at the time, fans' opinions to this game seem to be more mixed, with some saying the game hasn't aged very well. As for me though, I still think it's fairly decent by the standards of the series. Let's get right into why that is. The story is, like pretty much every other Mario game ever, very simple. Doubly so too, since this is a handheld game after all. On the surface, it may seem somewhat different since it features different locations and characters from most Mario games, but if you look deeper into it, it's pretty much the same exact plot as Mario 1. Super Mario Land takes place in Sarasa Land, a place which is presumably close to the Mushroom Kingdom. The ruler of the land, Princess Daisy, yep, this is the game she makes her debut in, has been kidnapped by an evil alien-like creature called Tatanga. Mario, who is not currently occupied with saving Princess Peach from Bowser, hears about Daisy's predicament and sets off to save her and restore peace to Sarasa Land. Short, simple, stupid. Anything that gets the game right on with is fine by me. Mario is a franchise with a full gameplay focus and very light tone anyways, so the fact that this story is very simple is perfectly fine. The story also motivates the gameplay well enough, so it gets a passing grade from me. The graphics of Super Mario Land are, unsurprisingly, much more rudimentary than even Mario 1. The Game Boy is a fairly weak system even by handheld standards, since it didn't have a backlit screen or even color graphics. As such, Super Mario Land had to make some compromises in order to be more comfortable to play on the handheld. For one, their sprites are incredibly small and low detail. Half the time, many of the enemies are only a few pixels in size, which I honestly find kind of funny if anything. The backgrounds are also very simple, and since there's obviously only three colors, black, white, and gray. It's an early Game Boy game and it really looks like it. However, I find that the simple visual style is a benefit that the game has. Since the Game Boy has an incredibly small screen that's only in black and white, trying to add detailed visual would only cause confusion as to what's the background and object and what's a part of the foreground. Thankfully, Super Mario Land has sprites with darker shades and backgrounds of very light shades, which makes it very easy to tell the two apart. I never died one time in this game because of contrast issues, which I very much appreciate. I also quite like the wacky new enemy designs, many of which haven't been seen after this game. So while it's not essentially impressive graphically, the visuals are still very much built around the limitations of the hardware. Next, the soundtrack. The story and graphics are somewhat barren, but the music is something I can offer nothing but praise for. The music in this game is downright incredible, and is some of the best 8-bit video game music I've ever heard. The melodies are very catchy, high energy, and they help give life to the otherwise simple looking environments. I don't know what else to say, I'll just let the music speak for itself. That is some seriously good stuff. I'd actually say that these songs are right up there in quality with Mario 3 and Mario World, which is doubly impressive coming from a simple Game Boy game. Speaking of which, it's time to talk about the gameplay. Super Mario Land is pretty much the same as the other games. It's yet another 2D side-scroller where you have to run, jump, and defeat enemies to reach the end of each stage. I'm not sure why I keep explaining this since you probably all know what a platformer is, but whatever. The controls are rather strange. Mario feels fairly stiff and has somewhat awkward air control, even when compared to Mario 1. This can make it somewhat difficult to jump on the small enemy sprites, and certain jumps can feel rather awkward at times. It feels quite jank at first, but I quickly adapted to it. Once you get used to it, the controls are functional just like Mario 1, but reaching this point can be somewhat irritating, even more so than Mario 1. Still, I was willing to work around it for the sake of enjoying the game. The level design is also decent, not as good as most of the console games, but enjoyable in its own right. It's generally well balanced around the controls and offers some decent platforming for an early Game Boy title. Like Mario 1, it is fairly basic, but this is obviously due to it being a Game Boy game. There's also 2 shoot-'em-up levels where Mario takes control of a vehicle. These are decent fun as well, and offer a brief break without overstaying their welcome. Unfortunately, the game has a few minor difficulty balancing quibbles. For one, the hit point system is just like Mario 1. If you get hit with the Super Ball power-up, which is basically just a fire flower at a slower rate of fire, you'll shrink to small Mario and will have to find 2 power-up blocks to get it back. Additionally, the game has limited continues and no continue codes, so if you have to start the game over from scratch if you die too many times. I also find that the extra life minigame is much harder to win than the other games in the series, which is a little bit irritating. Not to mention there's also a few instances of annoying enemy placement, particularly these tiki bastards that run on screen before you can react. However, these things don't bother me as much as they could have for one reason: the game's short length. Super Mario Land has only 4 worlds consisting of 3 levels each, for a total of 12 stages, and it only takes about a half hour to 40 minutes to go through the whole thing. As a result, I don't think having to restart the game upon a game over is really that offensive. It can be a mild annoyance, yeah, but nothing more than just that, a mild annoyance. Overall, Super Mario Land is a decent entry in the series, and it's pretty good for an early release Game Boy title. It's not some amazing masterpiece, but it's fun for what it is, and I would recommend checking it out if you haven't. $10 for an original cartridge is quite steep for a half-hour game, so I'd recommend emulating it. Either way, it can make for a pretty fun afternoon. So with that said, let's move on to the sequel, Super Mario Land 2: 6 Golden Coins. Now here's the game I've been looking forward to reviewing. Super Mario Land was a decent platformer in its own right, but Super Mario Land 2 is where it's at. I really like this game, and it's one of my personal favorite Mario entries. This makes it all the more tragic that barely anyone talks about this one. They always seem to bring up the first game when talking about Game Boy Mario games. Hell, even Nintendo seems intent on forgetting about this one for whatever reason. As for the development, it was once again handled by Nintendo R&D 1, with Gunpei Yokoi taking the helm as producer again. Miyamoto had little to no involvement, just like Mario Land 1, and was busy with some more SNES projects alongside the rest of Nintendo EAD. The team seemingly wanted to take the game in a more familiar direction, giving it an art style more similar to the console games. It was released in 1992, and while it didn't sell as many copies as the first game, it performed well in its own right. Not many people talk about this one, but those that do seem to absolutely love it and call it one of the most underrated entries from the series history. In case you couldn't tell, I'm one of those people. So let's dive in and see why that's the case. Starting with the plot. Super Mario Land 2 picks up where the first game left off. Following his rescue of Princess Daisy in Sarasa Land, Mario returns to his home in Mario Land. However, once he gets there, he finds that his castle has been taken over by his evil doppelganger, Wario, making his debut in this game. Wario took over the castle while Mario was busy saving Sarasa Land and hypnotized the various creatures that inhabit the island. He then took the 6 golden coins, which can open the door to the castle, and scattered them across the land. Mario now has to travel to the various parts of Mario Land to retrieve the golden coins, defeat Wario, and take his home back. This plot is actually rather original. For once, it doesn't follow the cliche "the princess has been captured, save her" story, and instead focuses on Mario taking back what's his. That's rather refreshing, because there were 3 straight games that had essentially the same plot released right before this one. This story provides adequate justification for what you do in the game as well, so all in all, I'd say it works pretty well for what it is. Next up, the graphics, and the hot mama, these are a massive improvement over the first game. Mario Land 2 is still in black and white, yeah, but I truly don't care. The sprites and environment tiles are bigger and have much greater detail, the backgrounds are more interesting, and the aesthetic is generally more familiar than the first game. In spite of this, however, it's still incredibly easy to see what you're doing because of the contrast between the sprites and backgrounds. The art direction is also surprisingly creative, which is doubly impressive considering how this is a Game Boy game. Mario will travel through treetops, a gigantic house, a haunted pumpkin graveyard, a gigantic robotic version of himself, and even outer space. Yes, outer space. a whole decade and a half before Super Mario Galaxy. I don't know what else to add. Super Mario Land 2 looks fantastic, especially for a Game Boy game. Next up, the soundtrack. The first Mario Land game had great music, but the tracks in this game are even better. In fact, I would call this one of my personal top 5 Mario OSTs alongside Mario 3, Mario World, Mario 64, and Mario Sunshine. The music was composed by Kazumi Totaka, who is famous for Totaka's song. I'd say he did an excellent job, and the music of Super Mario Land 2 is catchy, energetic, and will never leave your head. Like Super Mario World, Mario Land 2 makes use of a leitmotif, and it works just as well here. The central melody they make use of is catchy as hell, and the songs are varied enough not to sound like the same song just with different tempos or instrumentation. So why not have a listen to some standout tracks? Holy shit, that is incredible stuff. This is without a doubt some of the best 8-bit music I've ever heard, and it's one of my personal favorite video game soundtracks in general. And finally, we've reached the gameplay. Needless to say, it's a massive step up from the original Mario Land in more ways than one. For one, I have to talk about those controls. Whereas the first game was somewhat awkward and took some time to get used to, the controls in Mario Land 2 feel as natural as breathing. The jumps are perfectly balanced between weight and floatiness, Mario's acceleration is very manageable, blah blah blah, you get the point. It's a lot of fun doing the various platforming challenges as a result, and I'd say it actually handles just as well as Mario 3 and Mario World. It even has the spin jump from Mario World, which is useful for killing enemies and breaking boxes from above. Super Mario Land 2 also has a pretty good progression system. I'd say it's even better than Super Mario World in this regard. Whereas that game had a well-implemented secret exit system, Mario Land 2 allows you to access any of the 6 worlds from the start, meaning you could do them in whatever order you'd like. These worlds are also, funnily enough, called zones like it's Sonic or something. Anyways, I like this progression system because of the freedom it provides, and there's even a few optional hidden exits in levels like Super Mario World. The power-ups are quite good by the standards of the series as well. Sure, there's not as many as Super Mario Bros. 3, but I'm not bothered by this because the ones we do have are very useful. Of course, there's the standard Fire Flower, but you also have the rabbit ears, which are essentially like the raccoon leaf or cape feather, only even more useful. I'm serious, you can spam the button and you'll barely descend. I definitely recommend using this power-up whenever you can, since it helps out quite a bit. As for the level design itself, I like it a lot. It features a surprisingly varied selection of set pieces for a Game Boy title. For example, Mario Zone. One level features gears and other moving stage hazards, while another takes place inside a giant building made of N and B blocks, a toy Nintendo made before they switched to the games market. One stage in this world even has a bunch of balls, and it's near the robot's crotch. Nintendo, what the hell were you thinking? The other worlds have just as many as interesting set pieces as this, such as the Moon Gravity and Star Maze in Space Zone, the Conveyor Belts in Mario Zone, and the Ghost Enemies of Pumpkin Zone, among others. This leads to a game that never gets old, as it's always trying new things with each stage. The platforming it's built around is also incredibly enjoyable and decently challenging, and the enemy placement and camera never get in the way despite the larger and more detailed sprites. As such, the difficulty is balanced incredibly well. The addition of 3 save files is also a nice touch. That's not to mention the abundance of extra lives. I find that this game's extra life minigames are the best in the series up to this point. The Fuse one is a bit tricky to win, but the far more common Crane game is very easy to consistently earn lives from. I actually use the music that plays as an audio cue, and once it reaches a certain point, I know to press the button, and it works almost every time. The game certainly isn't overly difficult, but it has its fair share of challenging moments. The bosses, unlike Super Mario Land 1, can actually be a bit tough at times, and certain levels, particularly the final stage, Wario's Castle, don't hold your hand. So while the power-ups are very useful and there's a lot of chances to get lives, the game isn't so easy that you'll mindlessly plow through it. So while the game is only about an hour long, it packs that time with very fun content. This game is absolutely fantastic and is, as the title of the video suggests, the definition of a hidden gem. The story is very original for a Mario game, the graphics are some of the best on the Game Boy, the music is catchy, memorable, and all around great, the controls are very smooth, the level design is creative and very well done, and the difficulty is balanced remarkably well. Sure, it's pretty short, clocking in at roughly an hour or so, but I well and truly don't give a shit. It's a fantastic game and one of my favorites in the series, and it deserves to be remembered alongside Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World. I don't understand why Nintendo seems intent on pushing this game aside for its predecessor, since it's much better in every conceivable aspect. That does it for my review of the Super Mario Land games. Overall, they're pretty enjoyable handheld platformers, and have unfortunately gone somewhat under the radar. It's a real crying shame that these two, particularly the second game, are rather obscure by the series standards, because I think they're very much worth checking out if you haven't done so already. Regardless, that's the end of the 2D portion of this marathon. My lord was that an experience. We've had some highs, some lows, and some really stinky lows, but even with that, I still enjoyed revisiting all these games again for the sake of the reviews. I think you understand why I like these games as much as I do by now. They control well, they're designed excellently, and feature some good visuals and music for the hardware they're released on. Generally speaking, that is. Alongside Sonic and Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario has some of my favorite side-scrolling platformers of all time. These games really are era-defining. But with that, it's time to move on. I finally reached a major turning point in the series' history. Times were changing and hardware was progressing to an all-new dimension, the third dimension. Of course, Mario would be one of the many franchises to follow suit, and he would soon begin receiving all-new 3D adventures on the then-new hardware. The time has come to finally, no pun intended, make the leap to this new era of the franchise and find out whether or not the plumber successfully made it through the transition. So join me next time when I finally review Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo 64. This has been Diamond Matter Studios, and I'll see you then. Have a good day. Gigantic ball sacks.